Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case of Sawada versus Endo. This case was heard in the Supreme Court of Hawaii in the year of 1977. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. So Sawadas, there's two of them, two Sawadas, were injured in a car crash. Mr. Endo, the defendant, hit them in this car crash. They filed a civil suit and they got a judgment granted in their favor. And it was roughly $24,000 between the two of them. And they were trying to collect it against Mr. Endo. Well, Mr. Endo didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of income, but what he did have was a parcel of property in Oahu. He owned this parcel of property as a tenant in the entirety with his wife. So him and his wife owned it together in a tenancy by entirety. That is a unique type of tenancy. It's a level higher than joint tenancy. You have to have the four unities of joint tenancy, which are time, title, interest, and possession. Then you have to have a fifth unity, which is marriage. So that fifth unity is satisfied for Mr. and Miss Endo because they were married when they purchased this property. So the Sawadas, they're like, we need to get paid, Mr. Endo. You're not giving us any money. So what they want to do is try and get a lien on Mr. Endo's property, so that if he tries to sell it at any point in time, or that if he tries to do anything with it, that they'll get money from it. So Mr. Endo is kind of aware of this and the tactic of the Sawadas. So what him and his wife do is they convey the property from themselves to their sons. So their sons now have the property under a conveyance. And the Sawadas, got wind of this. They thought that this was crooked. So they brought suit to try and say that the conveyance was fraudulent and should be completely struck down. So the issue before the court was that conveyance fraudulent, one, and then, two, the most important is if an individual, so a husband, in a tenancy by the entirety has debt leveled against him, can the debt collectors, so the Sawadas in this instance, collect that by attaching the debt to the property or trying to reclaim through the property that's also owned by the wife because it's a tenancy by the entirety. So the court wrestles with this. They talk about how it comes out different in different jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions say yes, if one husband does have debt, or one spouse, does have debt, that can be attached to the tenancy by the entirety, even if it is a tenancy by the entirety. So the court has to wrestle with it, and they look at jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and they categorize it into four different groups. But ultimately, what's important is they come down on the side of saying, in a tenancy by the entirety, debt that is owned by one individual in the tenancy, so one spouse, cannot be leveled against that tenancy by the entirety. So they say that the conveyance was valid and there's nothing wrong that Mr. Endo did when he did this. And so ultimately they're coming down on, it is a line wherein if you have a tenancy in common or a joint tenancy, debt can be levied on that property for the debt of one individual. But if you're in a tenancy by the entirety, there's kind of this extra fortress built around the property that's held in this type of tenancy, wherein debt owed by one individual cannot be levied on the whole piece of property. So that's the case. Let's just jump into a little bit of a discussion along with some ex ante implications. The first implication that I think that this case law serves to, it incentivizes individuals to get married, right? Because there's another protection that married couples have when they own property together that, just dating couples don't have. If you're dating and you own a home together, you just have a tenancy in common or a joint tenancy, the debt of one spouse isn't going to, that can totally be attached to that property. Whereas if you're married and you have a tenancy by entirety, there's something sacred about that home, that piece of real property, that debt cannot be attached to it if it's only owed by one individual, or unless, the individual that's going to owe the debt, so say they're trying to get like a loan out or something, says that, hey, yeah, you can levy debt against the tenancy by the entirety, but both tenants would have to agree to that. So what it incentivizes marriage, and it provides kind of this safeguard around property that married couples own together. I think that is a good incentive for society to incentivize more marriages, to incentivize more people to get together and form family units. And that could get really political. I'm not going to, but my opinion is that, yeah, that is good for society to incentivize people to get married. I think our tax code shows the same thing as well. Of course, the downside of this is it really does seem like the Sawada should be able to levy some type of interest against Mr. Endo if he doesn't have a lot of money, but he does have this pretty expensive piece of property in Oahu, which is highly sought after, especially now. Maybe they should be able to attach some type of interest if that's the only way they can get paid. Mr. Endo didn't have any insurance. He did cause the car accident that injured them. So it seems really unjust to them. Seems unjust to debtors and creditors. The court talks about how, creditors can, if they want to loan, with the contingency that the house be collateral or something like that, be a second mortgage, that both tenants, they can do that. And then the creditor will just say, hey, both tenants have to come together and say that this can be subject to debt of one individual. So I think this is an interesting case. It illuminates a safeguard fortress that is, in essence, created on a home owned in a tenancy by the entirety from debt of one individual. If you'd like to see more of these videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.